Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Title IX Insider. Today, we have a very special guest joining us where we're going to be discussing a lot of serious topics surrounding sexual violence, Title IX, compliance, and that very difficult conversation about disclosure and what happens when you disclose, what happens when you file a complaint or don't file a complaint, and later come out to share. And we feel there's retaliation at times that make us question if we should have just stayed silent and or if we are silent, reminding ourselves to be brave to come forward. So today's going to be a very interesting conversation, and Anne Hauben is here with us. So Anne, I would love for you just to introduce yourself really quickly, and we're going to get started.
So my name is Anne, and I grew up in Massachusetts, and we live in Connecticut now. And I am here to tell my story and my experience as a survivor, victim survivor of sexual violence, and my experience, throughout my whole adult life, and what it has been like since deciding to speak out 2 years ago about what happened to me. And a website that I have launching today, actually.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you being here today and being able to share with us. I know we're going to dive into some really serious areas that I do want to say could trigger individuals out there watching this right now. So, this is your first trigger warning right now. As a reminder, this is a time where individuals need to remember that when we hear these topics, it's important to take a minute to breathe and recall that we as a community are always standing up against all forms of rape culture, and we want to become bystanders to intervene and or individuals to prevent and increase awareness and outreach so that we all are feeling safe and protected and know our rights. And with that said, I do want to say, individuals out there that are watching this, please add your comments. If you like us, subscribe, like us, and follow us because we do release information every week. And we have our podcast now with our second season releasing every Wednesday. So, Anne, I'm going to ask my first question.
Okay.
And, it's always that very serious one. I would love, if you're okay with it, for you to share what did happen um, to you. When did it happen? What happened? And where were you?
So I was a senior in high school. It was the spring semester, month and a half before graduation. A group of us seniors um, living in the Boston area, we went on a spring break trip to Bermuda. The trip was not affiliated with the high school. It was just like a for fun trip, and it wasn't the whole class. It was maybe, I don't know, 30, 45 kids or so. And we went to Bermuda because it's close to Massachusetts, and back then it was a I don't know, tradition or every year a group of kids always seemed to go. Um, the drinking age was 18. It was a short flight. At the time, you didn't even need a passport. All you needed was your birth certificate to get into the country. There were a lot of other schools from Massachusetts and New England there at the same time. So it was all that kind of same age group. We went out to the bars and we danced, and it was supposed to be a good time, like just a fun vacation with the friends before we graduated. And one night we were at the bar, and I was very intoxicated, and I was a very small teenager. Um, I was a little bit of a late bloomer, so I wouldn't say I was childlike, but I was just much smaller in stature than a lot of my peers. So I could drink like the same amount and be that much more intoxicated because of my size. So this one night we were standing at the bar. I was standing at the bar, and this individual approached me, and a classmate, former classmate of mine, and he immediately separated me from the rest of the group, and he saw how intoxicated I was, walked me down the stairs of this um, club, bar, dance place, and into a cab. And, so it's not even like we were hanging out all night and dancing and flirting and even talking. It was like he approached me, must have said something, and immediately, separated me from the rest of the friends in the group and put and walked me out into a cab. Um, in the cab, I remember him being extremely aggressive, like all over me, and he was a football guy and he was very big and compared to my small size there was I couldn't I was physically helpless. I couldn't fight him off. I couldn't push him off because of the level of intoxication, but also the size difference. So he was being, very aggressive. I felt smothered. I remember the cab driver making a comment about not having sex in the car, which I remember that because it was very jarring for me to hear an adult man say something like that because I was, so young and, and I was 18, so technically an adult, but still very childlike in high school, very, um, and because I had never had sex before. So that was not even on the agenda, for the foreseeable future. I was not sexually act. I was very inexperienced in that department. Maybe I had like just some innocent consensual fooling around prior to that, making out, whatever. But nothing like that. So we're in the cab, and then the next thing I remember, I was back in my room, and I was sitting on the bed next to one of my roommates, and I leaned over to her, and I said to her, I remember I was still very intoxicated, like, like I couldn't even, like, I remember like not even be able to like sit up straight. And I leaned over to her and I said, my underwear is on sideways. I don't I don't put my underwear on sideways ever. And if I do, you immediately know you put your foot in the wrong place and you fix it. And both of my roommates remember there being blood, which would make sense because I never had sex before. And I had one of my roommates was yelling at me, so, it had been determined that, sex had taken place, and one of my roommates was yelling at me, saying things like, "Aren't you embarrassed?" And how could you do that? Like, so that sort of added to the level of shame and self-blame that I was already like kind of feeling. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know that going to the police was even an option. I didn't know I didn't know like really like that a crime had just taken place, which is so common. And
What year did this
it
happen?
was 1990. And I know he told people, like he bragged about this to people. But no, I didn't like go to anyone and say, this is what happened to me and it was a sexual assault or anything like that. And I didn't tell my parents.
Yeah, and it was such a different time,
Yeah.
I mean, things were not even clear under Title IX yet, to be really honest with you. 1990 was even before the Supreme Court cases came out that would really define how to protect individuals from sexual assault and sexual harassment, even as students alone. However, if it would have happened like today or in the last 10 years, let's just say, Title IX would have been a huge protection for you, especially even overseas, because of the fact that this is somebody you went to school with. So I assume you saw him at school because you said it was spring break. So you guys were still in school together, right?
Yeah, we were still in school for like, so spring break was would have been third week of April, and the seniors end early, so we probably would have been done with school sometime in the middle of May or the end of May, and I wasn't in any classes with him.
Mhm.
Um, and there were 300, little over 300 kids in the high school, so I mean in my grade alone, so times that by four, and it was easy to not bump into somebody.
Okay. Did you see
Um,
him? Did you see him at school? Were you ever uncomfortable to go to school because you knew he was there?
No, I kind of just put this away in the back of my brain, and I just kind of felt like all I wanted was for time to pass between when it happened and like the rest of my life. Because I felt like the more time that would pass, I would start to feel better and stop having that anxious feeling in my stomach, which, eventually yes, that immediate feeling of anxiety dissipated a little bit, but with something so traumatic, like with something minor that you might be embarrassed about and feel anxious about, that will just go away. But a trauma like this, um, you can put it away, but it will keep coming up throughout your entire life in triggers and different PTSD symptoms and you
Have you
know
experienced other PTSD symptoms?
Yes, over like depression, anxiety, um, and triggers especially when things are in like the news cycle, that feels similar to what happened to me. I ran into this guy 4 years after the trip in a bar in Boston, in a crowded bar. Um, I remember the bar specifically where it was, and I was walking through the bar and I didn't see him, but he saw me and he got my attention and tried to engage me in conversation. And in this brief exchange, he throws out at me, "Oh, sorry about Bermuda."
Hmm.
And so now I'm 22. I'm still very young. I hadn't processed any of this, and I didn't know what to say in that moment. So I kind of just like I knew I didn't want to be near him. That's all. That's the one thing I did know because he just is vile to me. I just wanted to get away from him, so I kind of just blew him off, and I kept going, with my friends. I knew it was his fault, but at the same time, I also kind of blamed myself a little bit. And I had regrets that I didn't have the courage or the strength or the self-esteem or confidence, I mean, to like march right over to his room and like tear his head off. Like I had a lot of regrets about that. Like that I just buried it and I didn't like project that anger that now I'm dealing with all these years later. So the next time I really talked about it was, after Facebook had come about and the other roommate, the one that was yelling at me and shaming me, we had connected on Facebook when it became a thing. And at some point, a few years later, I was messaging with her. I said, I want to get something off my chest. And do you remember that night in Bermuda with war? I wanted to, tell you or that wasn't my fault. And again, she also agreed. She's now probably at this point in her early 40s. So we're probably in our early 40s when I said that. And I really wanted to tell her this because it always bothered me that the way she treated me in the aftermath of all of that. Um, so as an adult and she's more educated now, she gets it. She gets that and she understood. And I never really blamed, I didn't really harbor any like ill will to her for acting like that because she was young and stupid too, like the rest of us, and ignorant to these things. And while yes, she could have been kinder, and her reaction made things that much worse than it had to have been. No, I didn't like hold a grudge against her, I guess you would say. And then another time I talked about it was when the Brett Kavanaugh hearings were going on, and those I was paying close attention to that, and that also was very triggering, and I was, struggling with feeling very anxious, even though I don't know, even though I was feeling anxious, I still felt compelled to watch it. Like I wanted to listen to Dr. Ford. I wanted to hear her story. She was brave enough to come forward, and I was going to be there and listen to her. I wasn't gonna like stick my head in the sand. But it was triggering, but at the same time validating, and felt like I wasn't alone. And when that was going on, I did text my husband at work at that time, and I like she kind of like inspired me to take that first step, even though it was a baby step. I texted my husband at work and I said, I was sexually assaulted in high school. I want you to know that, but I don't want to talk about it.
Mm.
And I texted it to him because I knew that if he was standing in front of me, like the words literally would not come out of my mouth. It was easier to like type something than it would be to say something. And we didn't talk about it.
You talk about that you told your husband through a text message. Did you ever talk to him after that?
No, not until June of 2023, after the perpetrator was running for city council, and I was struggling so much internally, and I didn't know what to do, but I felt like I couldn't just do nothing.
And when you told your husband that it was this individual that's running for city council, what did your husband say to you?
I knew he was a safe person to tell this to, but it was still very difficult to get the words to come out of my mouth even then. And I, you know, thought that I would be able to do it. And I literally got like three words out of my mouth and I started like sobbing. But I eventually got the story across and what happened. And I told him about the public running for public office piece. And he said, so this potentially could become something that is more public. And I said, I guess I don't know. I don't know what to do. And that's kind of where, from there, he was very, very supportive, and kind of not let me, but I kind of he knew I kind of had to figure out what to do. And he knew I had reached out to the Victims' Right Law Center in Boston. So that was my first step in talking to them. And that wasn't a great phone call. And after that, I was really upset. And I reached out to a friend of mine who's an attorney, and I asked her, I told her everything and I asked her what she thought I should do. And she told me to reach out to a friend of hers who is a tireless advocate for women. And she said I should call her up and see if she can set up a meeting and help me. And so I did that.
Did he
And
help you?
um, I think so. I mean, she,
I asked
she
that. I asked that because I get so many individuals that call me and then tell me that they thought they were getting good help, and then by the time we finish helping them, they realize they were not getting help. So
I
I was
mean,
curious.
yeah, I don't want to say anything bad about her because she's a good attorney, and she is she's a feminist, and she's not like where you are with all of this. Like there were certain things that sometimes she would say that like I don't think that that's good for your healing, where like she doesn't know what's good for my healing, only like, I do, and I will talk about that with a therapist, not my lawyer. Um, but she did say that because he made himself a public figure, he put himself in a different category with regard to defamation, because people have the right to criticize those who govern us. And if he brought a lawsuit, he would have to prove actual malice, meaning that I made the statements knowing that they were false,
Got
uh,
it. Mhm.
which that would be a difficult hurdle to overcome for him.
So this is interesting because,
You,
the beginning of all of this, I mentioned how individuals many times stay silent, right? We have like in Title IX cases and in regular sexual violence cases when individuals are sexually assaulted, only 10% of victims ever come forward. And so 90% stay silent because of the fear of retaliation, the fear of defamation, lawsuits. There's just so much around it. People not
Mhm.
believing them, the self-blame that you talk about. So, really, what sparked you coming forward officially then became that he was going to become a public figure. Um, what were those conversations, even with your own kids? Did you have these conversations with your kids before you were going to come forward, or you said, you know what, I'm just doing it?
Well, that's interesting. I did not tell my kids, but they could see that I was struggling. So this affected them as well because I was so anxious. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I lost like 20 pounds in like 2 months. Because I wasn't eating. I couldn't parent at 100%. So they knew, and I went back up and forth to Massachusetts a few times, and they were kind of like, why are you going up there? Like, I went up there to talk to some friends in person and see what they thought I should do. And because I wanted somebody to tell me, like I wanted like someone who's really good at like being an adult to say to me to tell them and say, okay, this is what you're gonna do. This is what we're gonna do. But I would like tell people and they'd be like, oh, geez, yeah, I don't know. Um, so they saw that happening and my daughter, who was 16 at the time, after I had put out this, so I didn't tell them before I put out the statement. So I put out the statement on October 26th. I would believe the attorney, uh, after she gave me the green light. And sometime in November, so I had taken screenshots of my statement, and she has this old iPad that is somehow connected to my phone. And at some point that next month in November, she had turned on the iPad to use the camera on it. And in the camera roll, my photos were on that camera roll on that old iPad. And she saw my statement and she read it and she didn't tell anyone. She didn't tell us that she knew that she read it, but she did go to the counselors at school and she was upset about it and she went and she told the counselors at school, which um, I felt good that she felt comfortable doing that. I was glad that she had that at school to be able to go to these people that she felt comfortable talking to. Um, and it was volleyball season and then there was finals and I wanted to tell her, but I was trying to find the right time and I didn't want to add another thing to her plate when she was junior year. She was so busy. Um, so it was March, it was spring break and we'd watched a movie and we were just sitting there when the credits were rolling. I said, I need to tell you something, and it's not easy to talk about, and it might not be that easy to hear. And she said, I know. I said, what do you mean you know? She said, I know what you're going to tell me. I said, how do you know? She said, I saw screenshots. And I said, oh, so that was a little disconcerting because I felt bad that she was carrying this and she knew about it and she didn't tell us. And she said I was gonna say something and I kept like there were times where I was just gonna say tell you that I knew, but then I figured that I knew that you would tell me and I figured that I would just wait and you would tell me when you were ready.
Mm.
So we had a really good conversation at that point. And then my son, I told him everything a few months later.
When individuals go through something like this, it's hard for those that haven't experienced it or know someone that's experienced it to understand why you just can't get over it. And as I'm listening to you, it's, taken 20 plus years for you
Mhm.
to officially come forward, really start talking about it publicly, and having those kind of miniature moments throughout your timeline, kind of almost pushing you towards it. Um, and as you described it, it definitely is PTSD because it was always kind of a triggering moment for you. Are you going to therapy now? Like, do you advise that for individuals that have gone through something like this to
Yes.
therapy, especially if they don't come forward because they're afraid of retaliation?
Yes, and I feel like finally processing this in therapy, not just with the therapist, but like in like group therapy, like with other survivors, was very helpful in healing and helping me be able to finally be able to talk about it without getting really upset and like sobbing. Because the more talked about it in therapy and just with supportive people, the easier it got to talk about. And
Mhm.
now I can talk about it. Like I can have a conversation without getting super emotional.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. And again, I feel horrible that all of this happened, and especially I know I've worked with individuals that were victimized late 90s, early 2000s when Title IX rights were just coming really to be understood. Clary Act rights were just coming to be understood and mandated. Um, your case is one that would have fallen under Title IX.
Hmm.
And it really would have been a protection for you, a layer for you where you would have needed to be educated. And I'm glad that you're educating now, with Callisto, for example, on consent, what consent is for the community, because that's where it starts. In the 90s, late 80s, men, boys were not being taught what consent was.
No.
And that has been kind of a challenge even recently in court cases where we're seeing that that's becoming the excuse. Well, I didn't know about consent. I didn't know what the definition of consent was, so I didn't know what I did was wrong.
And yeah, and I see these people that say these really terrible victim blaming things, and it just terrifies me that these people could end up on a jury.
Hmm. Yeah, but Title IX, is meant to ensure that that prevention education is in place, especially at schools, K through
Hmm.
12 and higher education. And in your situation, you would have had those moments of education where you would have known to step forward, say something happened to you versus just staying quiet, but you just didn't know. It was a different time.
Hmm.
Doesn't make it okay though.
Hmm. No.
For
Mm.
example,
It wasn't, yeah.
internationally, there's no rights in many countries for individuals. That doesn't mean it's okay for a woman's body, a boy's body, a male's body to be perpetrated against without their consent.
Hmm.
Um, are there times you ever wonder or think to yourself you should have just stayed silent?
No,
Why not?
I don't have one single regret about coming forward because it really lifted this huge weight off of my shoulders. And since coming forward and speaking out, I literally have, and it sounds so cliche to say, I've literally never felt happier and lighter in my life. My husband and I argue less. I'm not sad all the time. Not all the time. I wasn't sad all the time, but I haven't like gone in my room and not like come out for a couple of days. I haven't done that in 2 years. It's been it's I- it's been so like freeing. Like I'm out of this like prison that I was in. This prison. Like it feels like I've been let out of jail.
Amazing. Amazing. I think my only other question then is, do you feel that you should have come out and said all of these things sooner?
I think that if I had come out with this like when it happened, I think it would have been 100 times more traumatic for me because the victim blaming and shaming has been so bad in 2024, 2025. Like in 1990, it would have been that much worse. My I had a stepmother. She wasn't great. I don't think that she would have been kind to me about it. Um, so in my journey, I feel like this happened, you know, me speaking out as an adult where I have, now I have that support system and the supportive husband and I have resources and, adult money that I can, get help and advice from professional people if I need it, where I wouldn't have had that when I was a kid, which is why I feel like it's so important for people to be there for young people who are going through this and say, you don't have to do this alone. We're going to help you. And that's one of the reasons I feel like it's so important for, even though I didn't speak out for 33 years, like I've gotten messages from young people thanking me for speaking out. Um, and one young person said, you speaking out makes that much more likely for my generation to hold our abusers accountable.
Amazing. Yeah. And you watching somebody else being brave made you more brave. So
Absolutely.
it's kind of a snowball effect, right? Where we
Mhm.
all kind of help one another to be brave in our own time. It doesn't matter if it's early on or later on, as long as you come forward and don't drown in that silence. I think that's the main point here.
Mhm. And this, as you know, like the sooner you have that support after something terrible like that happens, the better outcome you have in like the rest of your life, as far as like PTSD symptoms not being as severe.
Right. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your website. What is it you're going to release and what is your message through your website?
Well, the website is basically just like it tells a little bit about my story and the timeline of events and how everything came to for fruition and where I am at this point in my journey. And it talks about my advocacy and activism on the page and the work I've been doing in the realm of legislative change. I submitted written testimony in Connecticut in support of the Connecticut version of the Speak Your Truth Act, which is the bill that Victoria Burke first got passed in California in 2023, which protects survivors from retaliatory and frivolous defamation lawsuits, which is the law that Blake Lively was able to just utilize to get Justin Baldoni's $400 million defamation lawsuit dismissed with prejudice. So I submitted written testimony in Connecticut. By the time I got involved, the hearing had already taken place, so I couldn't testify in person, but there was still time to submit the written testimony. But in Massachusetts, it's further behind in the process. So in June, I drove up there and I spoke in person in support of the Massachusetts version of this bill. Um, and there's another similar bill that's going to be coming to hearing in September, and I'm going to drive up there again and testify for those state reps that are bringing that forward. And it's so important that survivor voices be protected.
I think a lot of us can learn from you, as far as having that conviction to say what happened and to be brave even when we're scared, to step forward and remind others to step forward too. As I mentioned earlier, it's only 10% of individuals ever come forward. And so that means that there's 90% of folks out there that are just staying silent, watching, observing those that are brave, wishing that they could be brave. What would you say to them?
Um, it is scary. Like I'm not gonna like sugarcoat it. It is scary. But if you want to speak out and it's safe to do so, um, I feel that it is, I don't want to say it's the right thing to do for everybody, but if you want to speak out and it's safe to do so, do that. And hopefully the people around you will support you and not try to silence you. And that's also where I feel like the education piece is important for like the general public to understand that. Like we cannot continue to sweep these things under the rug because silence perpetuates violence.
Right. Yeah. And whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years later, it does make a huge impact, especially on your physical health, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This affected every aspect of my adult life.
Yeah. Well, I understand it. I get that.
When I was at the hearing in June, I learned a lot of things because there were a lot of people testifying for different bills, and there was a woman there with a nonprofit organization, and she said that the average age for somebody to disclose is between the ages of 48 and 53, and a third of people never disclose and take it to their grave, which is which is really, it makes me sad. And I could have been one of those people, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, it is really sad. I know I over the years have always shared what I do for a living, and that means that individuals on the street sometimes just approach me and share things that they've never shared with a living soul. And it's heartbreaking because many times those individuals that share after they hear what I do for a living are in their 60s,
Hmm.
50s. And I think you are amazing. And I'm so happy that we connected to do this podcast and that your story is coming out, that you have a website, and that you've been a guest on our podcast. So
Well, thank you for having me, and it was really great to meet you. And I hope we can talk more in the future. I feel like I am doing my best to help other people, but I also feel like I still have so much to learn from people like you and Tracy Tomasi and Jess Michaels and all of these people that I really I pay attention to things that they say, and they're very knowledgeable, and I just want to like soak it all in and
mhm,
learn to be better at helping other people.
awesome. Yeah, we're going to be building this community together, and it doesn't stop here. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
All right, good. Good.
So with that said, everyone, thank you so much for watching and or listening on Spotify to this podcast. Our second season is in full swing, so please continue to listen, to like, subscribe, and follow us on all platforms. And we will see you all soon. Take care and thanks again.
Thank you.